So if you follow me on this channel, you will see one of the things that we've consistently taken a look at is the consistent trend of Israel, people from Israel, or people that speak on behalf of Israel, always pointing the finger at everybody else and saying that it's their fault, and never ever admitting and owning up to the fact that Israel along the way have probably done some things wrong. In this clip, we are going to see Lewis Goodall press this Israeli academic, and we're going to see her become pretty much unhinged to the point where she doesn't let him speak. She keeps cutting him off, and she almost starts shouting at him quite aggressively. As usual, let's watch this clip in full. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts towards the end.
I think it's part of a lack of understanding, including in Israel, that anti-Semitism has one definition, whether it comes from the extreme right, the extreme left, the extreme Islamist, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. The result of a very long democratic process that was adopted by more than 40 countries, including the UK, across institutions and many of the universities in the UK, enables to identify and combat anti-Semitism for precisely what it is, which is the predictor of extremism, as I said, no matter where it comes from. And that is, in fact, in many, many ways, what's been the hindrance across spaces and places in comprehensively identifying and combating and actually being able to even identify what has become the normalized mainstream strain of anti-Semitism that is ravaging democracies around the world, including in the UK, including with the murder of two people, Jews, praying on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar on Yom Kippur in Manchester, then leading to protests essentially in support of their murderers.
Well, I think everybody, the people involved, we're going to be speaking to one of those people in a moment, Michelle, but the people who've been turning up to these protests, they would deny vehemently the idea that they are turning up in support of that murder. They are saying that they are protesting against Israel's actions, which have been called genocidal by the United Nations in Gaza.
Let's be very clear. Genocide has a definition. The fact that the United Nations and its agencies and institutions, and I'm going to say the human rights infrastructure.
Yes, Michelle, but let me just finish the sentence. But you accuse those people of supporting that murder. On what basis do you say that?
Please allow me to respond. Genocide has a definition. And in very, very many places, including the UK, those people who think they're showing up in support of what is dubbed pro-Palestinian, if they were pro-Palestinian protests, they would be protesting to free Gaza from Hamas, a prescribed terror organization for whom human tragedy is the strategy.
They're protesting against the thousands of deaths that we've seen, including children in Gaza. That's what they're protesting against, and you don't get to choose, you don't get to decide what people protest about.
That is the strategy. Look, I came on today to make very clear that those protests are in fact enabling the continued war in Gaza, the continued holding.
So it's the protesters' fault that Netanyahu keeps the war going.
Finish a sentence. Please allow me to finish a sentence. The continued holding of 48 human beings abducted on October the 7th, when more than 1,200 people were burned alive and butchered and raped, and more than 250 were abducted into that same Gaza.
So sorry, Michelle. Sorry, let me just get this straight.
Terror organization that uses the children of Gaza and the people of Gaza as human shields.
So let me just get this straight.
Sure,
you're saying that the reason that those poor souls, the hostages, are still being detained, or one of the reasons, is because people turn out week after week on the streets of Britain to protest what they see as the inhumane, disproportionate, outrageous response of the Israeli government to civilians in Gaza. You're saying that it's their fault, and it's not Netanyahu. No, let me finish the question. And it's not Netanyahu's fault who chooses to continue to prosecute this war. We should blame those people turning up on the streets of Britain, should we?
Israel has been embroiled in what is a 2-year-long war that began on October the 7th, launching thousands of rockets,
yes, no one denies that.
Hamas, but by Hezbollah, by the Houthis, by Iran itself, the criminal Islamic regime in Iran. So if people in London truly care about human rights, they would be not just protesting to free Gaza from Hamas, but to free Lebanon from Hezbollah, to free Yemen from the Houthis,
to choose what they care,
Iran
what they
from the
protest
genocidal
about.
Islamic Republic. Instead, what they are doing is actually
in order to
exerting
protest
pressure
about
on the state
something,
of Israel a fellow democracy.
So, Michelle,
that
your view is
defending itself from the same genocidal terror and tyranny that endangers the UK.
So your view is that to protest about anything, you have to protest about everything.
Absolutely not, and God forbid.
Right, okay. Well, then no one would ever protest about anything.
That's actually precisely what's happening on the streets of London. What has happened over the last 2 years is the emboldening of genocidal terror proxies of an Islamic criminal regime in Iran.
What role do you think the Israeli government might have had in that, Michelle? Anything at all?
You're not letting me finish one sentence, and I doubt that anybody can understand anything we're saying in this way. Please allow me to finish a sentence so at least your listeners can doubt a little bit of what it is that's happening on the streets. And I don't doubt the good intent of the majority of the people that are showing up on the streets, actually believing that what they're fighting for is human rights. But what they are emboldening is the same genocidal terror and tyranny that Churchill warned Chamberlain that when given the choice between dishonor and war, when you choose dishonor, you will have war. We are embroiled and on the front lines of, that is the state of Israel, a war of barbarism on our civilization.
So will you welcome? So do you think Israel should welcome Tommy Robinson?
It has nothing to do with Tommy Robinson, and this interview for me has nothing at all to do with what it is that you began with. Tommy Robinson and many others have to utilize the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism to identify the anti-Semitism in their own backyard, if you will, if they're actually committed to combating anti-Semitism. That is the test, because as I said, it's interesting how the far or extreme right, the far or extreme left, the far or extreme Islamists intersect at that ever mutating, lethal, viral hate that is anti-Semitism, that the IRA definition actually enables to identify all strains.
One final thing, Michelle.
Whether they are the traditional strains or the new strain, modern strain, just the anti-Zionist strain that has systematically and for decades demonized, delegitimized, and applied double standards to the state of Israel, the Jew among nations.
One final thing, Michelle. Michelle, you say you don't doubt the intentions. I will just note that you began this interview by alleging that people who are turning up to those protests are celebrating and doing so supporting the heinous events that happened in Manchester. That is clearly.
What is it that you think
I'm just repeating what you said.
The brutal murder of anybody else would actually justify protests that celebrate those murderers?
They didn't celebrate those murders, Michelle. Well, then clearly you just going back on what you yourself just said when you said you don't doubt the intentions of many of those people, because once again you've alleged without any evidence, as far as I can tell or see, that those people are supporting the murders that we saw in Manchester. So that's completely outrageous. That's completely outrageous. But I just wanted to ask one final question.
Is in fact the
if you wouldn't mind, before shouting.
Because you asked me a question.
No, I didn't ask you a question. I gave the audience a piece of information. I just want to ask you one final question, which is you have been quick to assign blame for the extremism that we're seeing, and indeed for the continuation of the war itself in a way that I don't quite follow, to the people who have been turning up on the streets of Britain week after week in protest as to what's happening in Gaza. What role, if any, do you assign to the Netanyahu government for A, continuing that war and for the hostages not being released, and secondly, for the rising extremism that we're seeing, because many people believe, and many international institutions say, that a genocide is being committed in Gaza, that the response has been disproportionate. So what blame do you think the Israeli government has in this? Perhaps
you'd be able to follow if you allowed me to finish one coherent thought. And worse, perhaps your listeners or viewers would be able to follow if you allow me to finish one coherent sentence. But what I've tried to make accessible to you is that I'm trying to sound the alarms for you in the UK. It is the UK itself and other democracies that have to recognize that it's the UN itself that has enabled its own foundational principles.
Oh, so it's the UN's fault, right? Okay.
You're not letting me finish a sentence again. To be hijacked, redefined, inverted, weaponized, to demonize, delegitimize, and apply double standards to the Jew among nations. But as always with anti-Semitism, what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews.
So I'm going to pause it right there, and I just want to give you guys my thoughts personally, because I've said multiple times consistently on this channel, when we're looking at the genocide that's taking place within Gaza, there's a consistent trend when anybody comes out and they are defending Israel and what it is that Netanyahu's doing. It's always everybody else's fault. Let me know in the comments if you guys believe that it's a consistent trend. Do you guys see this trend that it's always everybody else's fault? Because that's all it is that I see. All I see when I take a look at any videos, when I take a look at any podcast, anything, if I see somebody on Twitter, I just see a consistent trend of Israel blaming everybody else and no one taking responsibility to say, hey, you know what? Maybe what Netanyahu is doing is too much. Maybe Netanyahu is going way overboard that he doesn't need to. Maybe what we're doing here in terms of killing allegedly more than 66,000 Gazans, majority of which are civilians and children, not Hamas. Maybe this is too much and we're going overboard. It's always a thing of it's everybody else's fault. In this video, you literally see this, I think her name is Mikal, try and blame protesters in the United Kingdom. She tries to blame them and accuses them of celebrating the two Jewish individuals who were killed in Manchester, and she tries to blame them. Listen, what happened to those two individuals was absolutely reprehensible. It was absolutely disgusting, and it shouldn't happen. But unfortunately, the problem that she doesn't understand is that the genocide within Gaza is still taking place. It's still happening. Democracy and the freedom to be able to protest, it doesn't go on a basis of this or that. That's not the way that it works. We have the right and the freedom to be able to protest and speak out against what it is that we disagree with. That is a fundamental right of any democracy, which she said that Israel is as well. So if that's the case, she should be understanding of that. She may not like it. She might not like it. Listen, Tommy Robinson and his lot, they done a protest the other day. I didn't like it because unfortunately for them, it was full of racists and not everybody, but it was full of racists and a lot of racism was taking place. But they have the right to be able to do that because we live in a democracy and that is one of the freedoms that we are allowed within a democracy. The fact that she's pointing the finger at everybody else, and this is what it is that a lot of people that speak on Israel's behalf do, is absolutely mental. Let me give you guys just a few statistics and just a few things just to, solidify the point that Israel has gone way too far when it comes to the genocide that's taking place within Gaza. The UN has found Israel has committed 4 out of 5 acts that are legally defined as genocide within Gaza. As I stated earlier, more than 66,000 Gazans have been killed. Mostly civilians, including many children and also women. Over 90% of the homes in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. Healthcare, water, food and other essentials are mostly cut off, pushing the population towards starvation. Attacks on hospitals, aid workers and journalists are amongst the highest ever seen. Forced displacement has affected almost all of the Gazan population. UN experts leading genocide scholars and rights groups say Israeli policies meet the definition of a genocide, and statements by Israeli leaders documented as evidence of genocidal intent. People like her need to look in the mirror before they come on interviews like these, because it doesn't matter what they say, what they do. We condemn Hamas. We are not supporters of Hamas. But just because of the fact that Hamas are a terrorist organization, that doesn't mean you kill majority civilians to the scale that it is that Israel has done. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this clip down in the comment section down below. I'll leave the link to this full video in the comment section down below as well, so you guys can go and check it out in full, because there is a bit more. And while you guys are down there, do me a massive favor, give this video a thumbs up and also hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys for helping us get to 72,000 subscribers. We're on a march towards 80,000, so help us get there. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next clip.